Every year the same thing happens, and it happens right around the end of July. A hobbyist who has done everything right for months walks up to their tank one morning and finds a fish dead on the substrate. Then another one the next day, then a third. The water looks clear. Nothing has changed in the routine, no new fish were added, no equipment failed, and yet the tank that was thriving in May and June suddenly starts losing fish one after another as the hottest stretch of summer sets in. This is not a coincidence, and it is not bad luck. It is one of the most predictable die-offs in the entire freshwater hobby, and it is driven by a handful of simple mistakes that almost nobody warns beginners about. By the end of this video, you will understand exactly why late July kills more aquarium fish than almost any other time of year, and you will know precisely how to stop it from happening in your tank. The core of the problem comes down to one thing that most hobbyists never connect to fish death, and that thing is water temperature. When the ambient temperature in your home climbs during a summer heat wave, the water in your aquarium climbs right along with it. A tank that sat comfortably at 76 degrees Fahrenheit through spring can drift up to 82, 84, or even higher during a sustained late July heat spell, especially in a room without air conditioning. Most hobbyists assume that because tropical fish like it warm, a few extra degrees cannot hurt. That assumption is exactly what kills the fish. The danger is not that the water is warm. The danger is what warm water does to the invisible chemistry that keeps every fish in that tank alive. Here is the mechanism that almost no beginner understands. Warm water holds less dissolved oxygen than cool water. This is a hard physical fact, not an opinion. As water temperature rises, its capacity to hold dissolved oxygen drops steadily. At 72 degrees, water can hold a healthy amount of oxygen for your fish. By the time that same water reaches 84 or 86 degrees, its oxygen carrying capacity has fallen dramatically. So at the exact moment the heat is climbing, the water is quietly losing the oxygen your fish depend on to breathe. This single fact is the foundation of the entire late July die-off, and almost nobody who buys their first tank is ever told it exists. Now here's where it gets worse, because two things happen at the same time, and they stack on top of each other. As water warms, your fish's metabolism speeds up. Fish are cold-blooded, which means their internal temperature and their metabolic rate rise directly with the temperature of the water around them. A fish in 84-degree water is breathing faster, burning energy faster, and demanding more oxygen than that same fish in 76-degree water. So on one side of the equation, oxygen demand is going up. On the other side, oxygen supply is going down. The fish need more air precisely when the water is able to give them less. That is the squeeze that kills them, and it tightens quietly over several days until the tank crosses a line and fish start dropping. The first visible sign is behavior most beginners misread completely. You will see your fish hanging near the surface, gulping at the top of the water, or crowding around the filter outflow where oxygen exchange is highest. The beginner sees this and thinks the fish look hungry, or that they are begging for food, so they feed them more. That is precisely the wrong response. The fish are not hungry, they are suffocating. They are going to the surface because the thin top layer of water, in contact with the air, holds slightly more oxygen than the rest of the tank. Feeding them more at that moment adds waste to the water, drives up biological demand, and makes the oxygen crisis worse. So the first simple mistake is misreading surface gulping as hunger instead of recognizing it as oxygen starvation. The second mistake is one of the most damaging, and it is completely invisible because it happens inside your filter. The beneficial bacteria that run your biological filter, the colonies that convert toxic ammonia into nitrite and then into far less harmful nitrate, are living organisms with an oxygen demand of their own. When the water warms and oxygen levels fall, those bacteria are competing with your fish for the same shrinking supply of dissolved oxygen. Under oxygen stress, the efficiency of your biological filter drops. The colony cannot process ammonia as fast as it normally would. Meanwhile, your fish, with their sped-up summer metabolism, are producing more waste and therefore more ammonia than usual. So ammonia begins to accumulate in a tank that was perfectly stable a week earlier, and it accumulates fastest during a heat wave when your filter is least able to keep up. The water still looks crystal clear, which is why nobody catches it until fish are already dying. And that is worth sitting with for a moment, because the clear water is one of the cruelest parts of this whole event. Beginners are trained to judge a tank by how it looks. Clear water reads as healthy water, but clarity only tells you about suspended particles floating in the tank. It tells you nothing about dissolved oxygen, and it tells you nothing about ammonia, both of which are completely invisible to the eye. A tank can be crystal clear and lethally low on oxygen at the same time. a tank can be clear as glass and carry enough toxic ammonia to kill everything in it by morning. The very thing beginners rely on to reassure themselves is the thing that hides the danger until it is too late. That gap between what the tank looks like and what the water chemistry is actually doing is where the late July die-off lives. There is a third layer to this that makes late July especially deadly, and it has to do with ammonia chemistry itself. Ammonia in your water exists in two forms that shift back and forth depending on conditions. One form is relatively harmless. The other form is highly toxic. The balance between them is controlled by temperature and by pH. Here is the critical fact. As water temperature rises, more of the ammonia in your tank shifts into the toxic form. So the same total amount of ammonia is significantly more poisonous to your fish in warm water than it is in cool water. This means late July delivers a triple hit all at once. Oxygen is falling, the biological filter is struggling, so ammonia is rising, and the warmer water is converting more of that ammonia into its most toxic form. 3 separate problems, all triggered by the same heat, all landing on your fish simultaneously. This is why the die-off is so sudden and so predictable, and why fish that seem perfectly healthy can be gone within 48 hours. The fourth mistake is a well-intentioned one that makes everything dramatically worse: the panic ice response. A hobbyist notices the tank is hot and the fish are stressed, so they grab ice cubes or a frozen bottle from the freezer and drop it straight into the tank to cool things down fast. The problem is that this causes a rapid, sharp temperature swing, and fish tolerate rapid temperature change far worse than they tolerate a stable elevated temperature. A tank sitting steadily at 83 degrees is stressful but survivable. A tank that lurches from 83 down to 74 in 20 minutes and then climbs back up sends fish into thermal shock, which suppresses their immune system and can kill them outright. The instinct to cool the tank is correct. The method is what causes the damage. Sudden change is the enemy, not the warmth itself. There's also a question of which fish go first, because the die-off does not hit every species equally, and knowing the order gives you an early warning system. The fish most vulnerable to the summer squeeze are the ones with the highest oxygen demands and the ones adapted to cool, fast-flowing, oxygen-rich water in the wild. Species that come from cool mountain streams and rivers are the first to struggle because their bodies were built for water that is naturally saturated with oxygen. Larger-bodied fish and heavily muscled, active swimmers demand more oxygen than small, slow species, so they feel the squeeze earlier too. Fish that naturally live in still, warm, low-oxygen water in the wild tend to hold on the longest, because some of them evolved the ability to gulp air directly from the surface. So when you see your most active, most oxygen-hungry fish suddenly hanging at the surface while the others still seem fine, that is not a minor observation. That is your tank telling you the oxygen crisis has already begun, and it is telling you while there is still time to act. The first fish to gulp at the surface is a warning meant for all the others. Now, everything I have covered so far is the complete picture of why the late July die-off happens, and if you understand it, you are already ahead of almost every beginner in the hobby. If you want the full version of this kind of practical, no-nonsense aquarium knowledge, I have written a collection of 4 ebooks that go far deeper than a single video can, including the complete breakdown of managing your tank through seasonal temperature swings and keeping your biological filter stable and when the heat turns the water chemistry against you. They are written in the same plain language, no fluff style as this channel, where every word earns its place, and the whole collection is linked in the description and the top pinned comment, with a launch discount applied automatically right now. Now let me walk you through exactly how to prevent this die-off, because the solutions are simple and they cost almost nothing. The single most important thing you can do during a heat wave is increase surface agitation, because surface agitation is how oxygen actually gets into your water. Oxygen does not enter your tank evenly from above. It enters primarily where the surface of the water is disturbed and broken, because that is where gas exchange happens. The more you break and churn the surface, the more oxygen dissolves into the water, and the more carbon dioxide escapes out of it. So the first move is to point your filter outflow so that it ripples and disturbs the surface as much as possible. If you have an air pump sitting in a drawer, this is the moment to use it. An air stone driving a steady column of bubbles does 2 things at once. It agitates the surface, and it circulates water from the bottom of the tank up to the top where it can pick up oxygen. During a summer heat wave, an air pump is not optional equipment. It is the cheapest life insurance your tank can have, and it directly counteracts the exact problem that is killing the fish. The second solution is to cool the tank correctly, slowly, and gently, without ever shocking your fish. The safest method is to lift the lid or cover off the tank to allow heat to escape and to allow evaporation, because evaporation naturally pulls heat out of the water. You can point a small fan across the surface of the open water. As air moves over the surface, it accelerates evaporation, and evaporative cooling can bring the water temperature down by several degrees in a controlled, gradual way that does not shock the fish. This is the correct version of the cooling instinct. Instead of dropping ice into the tank and causing a violent swing, you use a fan and evaporation to bring the temperature down slowly and hold it there. If you absolutely must use something frozen, the right way is to float a sealed bottle of frozen water in the tank, so it cools gradually, and you can remove it before the temperature drops too far. Never pour ice or freezer cold water directly into the aquarium. The third solution is to stop feeding as heavily during the hottest stretch. Every bit of food you add creates waste, and every bit of waste places additional demand on a biological filter that is already struggling in low oxygen conditions. During a heat wave, cutting back to a lighter feeding or even skipping a feeding entirely on the hottest days reduces the ammonia load on your system at exactly the moment your filter is least able to handle it. A healthy adult fish can go several days without food and suffer no harm whatsoever. What harms them is a spike of ammonia in warm, oxygen-poor water. Feeding less is not neglect during a heat wave. It is protection, and it is one of the easiest protective moves you can make. The fourth solution is simply to test your water during hot weather, even if you never test it at any other time of year. This is the single habit that separates the hobbyists who lose fish every summer from the ones who do not. When the temperature climbs, start checking your ammonia level. If you catch ammonia rising early, you can respond with a water change and increased aeration before it ever reaches a lethal level. The beginner who does not test only finds out there is a problem when a fish is already dead, and by then several more are usually already in trouble. A few minutes with a test kit during a heat wave tells you exactly what is happening in the invisible chemistry of your tank, while there is still time to act. Remember, the water looks clear the entire time this is happening. The test kit is the only way to see what your eyes cannot. And if ammonia does begin to climb, despite your efforts, the correct response is a partial water change with dechlorinated water that is close to the tank's current temperature. A water change dilutes the ammonia directly and immediately, buying your biological filter time to recover. The key detail that beginners get wrong is the temperature of the replacement water. If your tank is sitting at 82 degrees and you pour in a large volume of much cooler water, you cause the same thermal shock as dropping in ice. Match the temperature of your replacement water reasonably close to the tank. Change a portion of the water rather than nearly all of it, and you dilute the toxins without shocking the fish. Done correctly, a calm partial water change is the single most powerful emergency tool you have, and done carelessly, it becomes one more way to shock the fish you are trying to save. There's one more preparation step worth making before the heat ever arrives, and it costs nothing at all. Simply know your tank's normal temperature. Most hobbyists have a thermometer on the glass and never actually look at it. If you build the small habit of glancing at that thermometer every day through spring, then the moment the water starts climbing in July, you will notice immediately, because you will know what normal looks like. The hobbyists who lose fish are almost always the ones who never watch the temperature until something was already wrong. Awareness is free. And in this hobby, awareness is the difference between reacting in time and reacting too late. When you step back and look at the whole picture, the late July die-off is not some mysterious plague that strikes healthy tanks at random. It is a completely predictable chain of events. Ambient heat pushes up the water temperature. Warmer water holds less oxygen. Fish metabolism speeds up and demands more oxygen at the same time. The biological filter struggles under oxygen stress, and ammonia begins to rise. Warmer water converts more of that ammonia into its most toxic form. The fish with the highest oxygen demands begin gulping at the surface, and then a panicked hobbyist drops in ice and finishes the job with thermal shock. Every link in that chain is something you can now see coming, and every link is something you can break with an air pump, a fan, a lighter feeding schedule, a test kit, and a gentle water change. None of it is expensive. None of it is complicated. It is simply knowledge that most beginners are never given until after they have already watched a tank full of healthy fish die in the space of a week. The hobbyists whose tanks sail through every summer without a single loss are not luckier than you, and they do not have better fish. They simply understand what heat does to water chemistry, and they prepare for it before the hottest days arrive instead of reacting after the damage is done. Now you understand it too. Get an air pump running, keep your surface moving, watch your temperature, feed a little lighter, and test your water when the heat climbs. Do those simple things and the end of July stops being the deadliest week in your aquarium and becomes just another stretch of the calendar your fish sail straight through. If this video helped you, take a look at the ebook collection linked in the description and the pinned comment, and subscribe so the next one finds you before the next problem does.